It is exactly what we talked about last week. This government, and particularly David Seymour, be cautious of their language. They use language which sounds appropriate. We shouldn't have to make decisions around medicine based on race. Yeah, we shouldn't. I think many people agree. But currently, there are issues within the medical fraternity where it's obvious that some races are getting lesser service and worse outcomes. So at the moment we do, but people will hear that and say, no funding based on race, no funding based on race. It makes sense. It's like, yeah, but the words may sound okay, all equal, right? But it's how they're going to then implement that policy is what you've got to be aware of. Let's get straight to it from this morning. Daniel Faitaua talking to, it looks like Christopher Hipkins is sucking on a lemon there, doesn't it? About this exact issue.
Ditching the Treaty of Waitangi consideration. Do you agree?
I think it's a step backwards. Ultimately, we have to recognise that Māori in New Zealand have disproportionately worse health outcomes compared to non-Māori, and I do think that the whole health system should be focused on doing something about that. I think, ethnicity does play a role here, and we know that some ethnicities, for example, are more prone to some health conditions than others, and I don't think Pharmac should be completely blind to that.
When you hear Mr. Seymour say that drugs should not be going to people based on the need of their ethnic background, is that a fair statement?
Well, I think it should always be based on clinical need, but we have to recognise the fact that there is more clinical need for some drugs with some segments of the population than...
Chippy just exploded there for a second. And this is the thing, right? I think everyone, if you take a step back, you'd agree, right? But what people like Seymour are prepared to do, they are prepared to group people. Like we can group people by sex, mammograms, prostate things. They are prepared to group people by age, babies have vaccinations or whatever. What he's not prepared to do is group people by race. And that's where this thing we always talk about with Seymour, the racial undertones of everything he talks about. He's happy to group people and provide, let's just stay in the world of medicine for a sector of society, even if not everybody accesses it or uses it. But when it comes to race, he wants to level out or flatten the field. If there is research and evidence that says this group of people need this kind of funding and they're female, fine. This group of people need this kind of funding and they're Māori, no, sorry, can't do it based on race, Joey.
And I think, I hope this is an undertone, there's a sinister undertone in there as well, is if you turn around and you produce evidence that says, hey, look, Māori Pacific Islanders are more prone to these conditions and that sort of thing. And that could be down to a whole lot of things, and wealth and other inequality factors in there would certainly contribute to them. But when you sit there and you go, well, look, these people are more prone to these conditions, I think often there's this undercurrent of, like, when you talk about evening the playing field and just go, oh, race shouldn't come into it. It's almost like they're sort of going, well, we won't consider these races because we must all acknowledge that genetically they're inferior. And I think that has been more prevalent, back in the pseudoscience days at the turn of last century and all of that sort of stuff. But I think there's still an undercurrent of that whenever they look at these sort of things. The reason that Māori are poor, or the reason that Māori don't live as long or have poorer health outcomes, is just skirting around the fact that someone wants to pull out a medical journal from the 1800s and go, that's because the white race is superior. We're more robust. And I just can't shake that feeling sometimes when we're talking about health issues.
Yeah. Yeah. There seems to be, and I'm thinking about it as we're talking, kind of three ways to do this, right? You can fix the problem, like the issue, whatever it is. Let's say it's Māori dying 10 years younger than everybody. You can fix that through policy and that, and then you can pull out the safety net, right? You can pull out the safety net whilst you have a plan to fix the problem, right? Which I wouldn't necessarily sign on to, but if you pull out the safety net and say, now we're going to do A, B, C, that would be then a plan. Or you can just pull out the safety net. And the latter of those three things is how this government is operating in everything. Pulling out the safety net and then going, shouldn't have to do this, not giving a solution and not solving the problem.
We've eliminated the problem, so this now doesn't have to be a consideration. It's a much stronger position than going, what's the Treaty of Waitangi got to do with Whāmek? Which is essentially what he's saying.
Yeah.
The Treaty of Waitangi should have everything to do with everything our government does.
What does?
Because that's the agreement. That's what David Seymour wants to erase.
And if you weren't with us last night, fantastic 35, 36 minute, what do you call it? Resource, that's what I'm looking for, as to understanding why what ACT is doing with their treaty principle is null and void. It is not what the treaty says. And the top, official translators, people who are licensed to be translators in the country, say so. Something I learned last night, Joe, this is a little bit of a tangent, but then I'll get back to the story, is I didn't know this. In the treaty, when it references New Zealanders, it's talking about Māori. Because in that time, the people they called New Zealanders were the Māori. The other people were called the English or the British or the settlers. So people read that today and they see New Zealanders and they think everybody. But in the treaty, when it was written New Zealanders, they were referencing specifically to Māori. Context matters. Right, let's get to the end of this. There's about 30 seconds to go.
With others. And so I don't think we should be blind to that. I also think that, if you look at the way Whāmek have viewed their relationship in terms of the Treaty of Waitangi, it's been about involving Māori in decisions that affect their healthcare. What could anybody object to about that? I think everybody should be involved in decisions that affect their healthcare.
But I guess the question is, how much of a factor is the treaty, though, when it comes to determining whether or not a drug should be funded?
Well, ultimately, we have a massive disparity in New Zealand. There are poorer health outcomes for Māori than for non-Māori. And I think that all of the different agencies that work in health should do something about that.